Dual-hinge display frames. Fold over the long horizontal lines towards the center. When you fold both of them over, it will leave a groove in the center. Then fold over the vertical lines to form a square. Two segments should overlap. The short side should be on the inside, the longer side will be on the outside and should meet at the corner. Nest the outside edges over the inside edges. Make sure that the corners match up when you have finished the nest. Here is a cutaway view of how the hinges are attached. I've used larger sheets of paper and showing only part of the square shape so that you can clearly see how the hinges are attached. After I finish this, I'll go back and repeat the same process with the actual paper. So let's see how these hinges are attached. First, take one sheet of paper and insert it into the one flap in the center of the paper. Bend the paper upward and over the edge. Next two flaps will be attached to the bottom, so you insert it on the bottom and fold it around the bottom. You do that one on either side of the central flap. You would then make the two frames meet together. And you want to be sure that they match up and line up with the edges lining up. You then complete the fold by bringing the flaps over and under the flap for all three flaps. You will need to lift up the inside paper a little bit. This can be tricky, but with a little practice you can do it. It is not a particularly difficult fold once you learn to have mastered the technique. Once completed, your hinges will work quite well and stay in place quite well. We will ensure that they stay in place even better when we add inserts. Now let's see the actual process performed on the real sheets of paper. Here I'm using smaller rectangles. The rectangle is double the width that I need for the flap, so I fold it in half. Now I can fold it in half with the white side out, or I can fold it in half with the purple side out. If I have the white side out, the hinges will show up white. If I have the purple side out, the outside flaps will show up in purple and will somewhat disappear on the frames. So I'm using the white side because it's easier for you to view as I'm performing the process. And I basically repeat the same process I showed you on the larger sheets of paper. Insert it into the groove inside, bend it around the outside, and attach the next sheet of paper, this time using the opposite flap. You are now ready to attach the other frame. Make sure your flaps are in place and fairly well lined up. Place the other frame on top of the flaps and bend the flaps around, inserting the end of the flap under the flap on the frame. You may want to use a clip to hold it once you have one flap in place, and that will hold it in place while you're inserting the remaining hinge flaps. Bend the flaps over and open up the inside a little bit and insert the flap under the inside groove. When inserting solid objects, or in this case folded prisms that fit the frame closely, you probably want to push them in halfway, meeting the groove on the inside. Then turn the object over and push gently along the edges until all the edges are over the outside of the object you're inserting, and then push gently down to bring it fully inside the frame. Once fully inside the frame becomes extremely stable. Stays together with a lot of mishandling. You can attach as many frames as. Here are some examples of the various ways you can use double hinge display frames. Notice that frames do not have to be square. They can be many other shapes. For example, in the lower left-hand corner, I've used a double kite shape, and when I attach the frames in a different configuration, I actually have the Einstein tile created from 4 double kite shapes. In the upper right-hand corner, I have what I call a tunnel display. When you arrange the frames using the double hinges, you can form a tunnel and put objects that don't fully block the object behind it, and you get a tunnel, what is called a tunnel display. Frequently, those are used on things like Halloween to show Halloween displays. On the lower right is translucent materials placed over transparent, actually clear plastic placed over translucent folded sheets of paper that I've done to make a tessellation. Inside the twisted centers of the tessellation, I've inserted tiny little squares. When I place colored sheets behind it, the colored sheet actually illuminates the display because it can show through the frame. This is a rather unique use of display frames because you can have see-through frames. The upper left-hand corner shows you how you can do a series of objects inside the frame. And in the upper, that particular example, I've inserted just plain squares. As a bonus, I'm showing the crease pattern that I used to create a pentagon prism. If you use a pentagon prism with display frames, you could attach triangular prisms and make it into a unfolding star if you wish. Here are the crease patterns for 3 different prisms that I have used with the Dual-Hinge display frames. I've used all 3 of these in different variety of displays with the Dual-Hinge display frames.